Hello everybody. Welcome to part 2 of our fiber and textile lesson. In this lesson you will learn about the two classifications of fibers, and we will then be focused on the three types of natural fibers. Natural fibers come from animal, plant, or mineral sources. We will discuss each one. Until the 19th century, only plant and animal fibers were available to make clothing and textiles. Today, however, half the fabrics that we wear are synthetic. Synthetic fibers are man-made fibers that are chemically produced. They are further broken down into two types, regenerated and polymers, which we will discuss later. Here is a microscopic comparison of natural and synthetic fibers. What are the differences that you notice? Take a few moments to look at this slide and see if you can pinpoint some differences. First of all, we have along the left side natural fibers until we get to the last one, polyester, which is a synthetic fiber. So if you looked at this closely, you should notice that the natural fibers are rougher, they are not as perfect, they have imperfections. However, the synthetic fiber is smooth and straight, and that's because synthetic fibers are chemically produced and man-made, and they are sort of cut out of a mold, as you will see later. So first we will discuss animal fibers. Animal fibers come from hair fibers of the animal. The most common animal fiber is wool. Fur does provide fibers, but it's technically not considered a textile. With fur, an animal is trapped and the skin is removed and treated, which results in a flexible skin that retains the fur. And of course, that's why animal rights activists have a problem with fur, because obviously the animal has to be killed for that. Whereas with sheep, you can shave the wool off and you don't have to kill them. Silk comes from the cocoon of a silkworm, and it's a type of webbing, kind of like a spider web. We'll talk a little more about that soon. All animal fibers are composed of protein, which of course makes sense because animal bodies are composed of proteins. Again, the most common is wool, and wool comes from sheep and goats, and the type of clothing that can be made from it is cashmere, camel's hair, alpaca, and flannel. And the different types of wool can be coarse or a little bit smoother, as you can see in these pictures. Silk is made from the silkworm. The silkworm is the larva or the caterpillar of the domesticated silk, and the silk moth rather, and it's called Bombyx mori, genus and species name. When they enter the pupal phase of their life cycle, they enclose themselves in a cocoon, and it's made up of raw silk, and it's produced by the salivary glands of the silkworm. If the silkworm is allowed to survive after it spins its cocoon and get through the pupal phase where it's ready to emerge, it actually releases enzymes that make a hole in the cocoon. They're called proteolytic enzymes. It makes a hole in the cocoon so it can emerge as an adult moth. Unfortunately, they don't often survive to that point because these enzymes are destructive to the silk, and they'll cause the silk fibers to break down, and then they're not marketable to be made into garments. So to prevent this from happening, silkworm cocoons are boiled, and they're not allowed to come to the end of their life cycle. The heat kills the silkworms, and the water actually makes the cocoons easier to unravel. So since the process of harvesting the silk from the cocoon kills the larvae, this process has been criticized widely by animal welfare and rights activists. Here are some silk fibers. some that have been dyed, and the one that's been held in the hand there is what it looks like when it's unraveled, when it's woven. So let's look at plant fibers. Plant fibers are grouped from the part of the plant from which they come. Seeds, fruits, stems, and leaves all produce fibers. Plant fibers vary greatly in their physical characteristics. Some are very thick and stiff, while some are very smooth, fine, and flexible. What all plant fibers have in common, however, is that they are made of cellulose. Protein and cellulose have very different chemical properties. This is useful to forensic scientists because they can use chemical tests to distinguish between animal and plant fibers. So, cellulose, that word may sound familiar to you. You may remember learning about cellulose in biology or chemistry. I'm sure that you did. Cellulose is a polymer. A polymer is simply a large molecule made up of repeated smaller molecules called monomers. Cellulose happens to be made up of glucose monomers. And again, plant material is made of cellulose. Some examples of plant fibers are cotton, linen, hemp, and jute. Cotton comes from seed pods, and it looks like a flattened, twisted ribbon when you view it under the microscope. Linen comes from the flax plant, and it's the stems of the plant, and it's very long and smooth, looks like bamboo stalks under the microscope. Linen is not so popular material anymore. Linen tends to wrinkle very easily. Hemp and jute are stem fibers. Ropes are made from some of these fibers, and clothing can also be made from hemp. Mineral fibers come from the earth, and fiberglass is actually, as the name suggests, it's a fiber form of glass. Asbestos fibers are mineral fibers that are found in rock. Fiberglass is used for insulation in building. Asbestos, if you look at this picture, see how these fibers, they almost kind of look like needles and they look very sharp. Asbestos is a mineral. It naturally occurs in rock. It's very durable, very fire resistant. So it's used in brake linings, ceiling tiles, siding and insulation, also in flame-proof clothing. Asbestos, however, is known to cause cancer. When the fibers are torn, for example, when asbestos tiles and insulation are ripped out, the fibers actually break up, and these tiny fragments are released into the air. They're very light, so they float in the air, and what happens is people breathe them in, and they cause tiny cuts in the lungs, which causes scar tissue that can become cancerous. And there's a condition called asbestosis, which is the tiny cuts and scar tissue in the lungs. It can lead to emphysema, can lead to cancer. So it's pretty scary. So this concludes our second lesson on fibers. Stay tuned for part 3.